Alright, let's jump right into this explainer. We are looking at an eerie, genuinely terrifying mystery that absolutely gripped the Americas back in the mid-90s. I want you to close your eyes and picture this. It's the dead of night. You're a farmer. You wake up to this suffocatingly heavy silence, walk out to your pens, and the air is just thick with a rank metallic odor. And then, you see your livestock. They are completely decimated. But, and here's the crazy part, they aren't torn apart like a wolf or a mountain lion got to them. There are zero signs of a struggle. They're mostly intact, except for a few deep, precise puncture wounds right on their necks. And supposedly every single drop of blood has been completely drained. It literally sounds like the opening scene of a horror movie, right? Well, for thousands of people waking up to this exact nightmare, it was very, very real. Today, we're going to completely dissect this legend. We are stripping away the shadows to perform a true autopsy on one of the most famous and frightening monsters of the modern age.
So what exactly drained the blood of Puerto Rico's livestock? That is the chilling question that sparked an absolute global panic. Back in 1995, all across these isolated rural farms in Puerto Rico, a string of gruesome, bloodless discoveries left local authorities completely baffled. We're talking chickens, goats, sheep, all found dead under utterly bizarre circumstances. The locals were gripped by this intense, paralyzing fear. People literally started locking their doors at sunset, terrified of the dark. They organized armed patrols with shotguns just to sweep the tree lines, and local mayors were even going on TV promising to protect their towns from this unseen, bloodthirsty menace. Everyone was asking the exact same terrified question. What on earth is doing this? Because whatever it was, it sure wasn't human, and it definitely wasn't acting like any natural predator we know of.
Let's look at Section 1, Birth of a Monster.
To really wrap our heads around this beast, we gotta go back to the very beginning. It's the second week of August, 1995. In the semi-rural town of Canóvanas, Puerto Rico, a woman named Madeline Tolentino claims she looked out her wide front window and saw something completely unearthly. And this wasn't just some blurry, fleeting glance in the middle of the night either. What makes her account so incredibly unsettling is that she said she watched this creature in broad daylight, fully exposed for several minutes. Up until that specific moment, there were only whispered rumors and mutilated animals. But Madeline, she finally gave the terror a face. She provided the very first, highly detailed official eyewitness account.
And what is truly terrifying here is just how incredibly specific her description was. Tolentino wasn't describing a rabid feral dog or a big bat. She was describing something ripped straight out of a nightmare. According to her, this thing stood about 4 to 5 feet tall, walking upright on 2 legs exactly like a human. It had this row of bizarre, sharp spikes running all the way down its back. Its skin was gray, leathery, and looked almost wet to the touch. No visible nose, no ears, just these small, terrifying slits and massive, dark, alien-like eyes staring right back at her. She even specifically noted that the creature was completely smooth between its legs, no visible genitals at all. Let's be real, this wasn't an animal. To anyone listening to this bone-chilling description, it sounded exactly like a hostile extraterrestrial.
Well, as you can imagine, the media frenzy was instantaneous. Shortly after these horrifying attacks and sightings hit the press, the whole tone shifted. It went from local terror to a massive, sensational spectacle. A Puerto Rican comedian and entrepreneur named Silverio Perez jokingly coined a name for the beast on his radio show. He called it El Chupacabras, which literally translates to the goat sucker. It was catchy, it was wonderfully grim, and man, it stuck. It just exploded into the cultural zeitgeist. As the Encyclopedia Britannica notes, this creature rapidly evolved into the southern equivalent of the Sasquatch. It became an absolute cryptozoological superstar. The legend was officially born, and it was ready to take over the world.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Hollywood Connection.
Now enter Benjamin Radford. He's a scientific investigator of the paranormal, and he literally dedicated 5 exhaustive years of his life to tracking the Chupacabra. When Radford interviewed Madeline Tolentino and meticulously broke down that famous 1995 sighting, he realized something absolutely astounding. Her description perfectly matched a very specific creature, but it wasn't an unknown animal emerging from the jungle. It was Syl, the terrifying alien monster from the Hollywood sci-fi horror film Species, which, wouldn't you know it, had just hit local theaters right before her sighting. Think about it. The bipedal stance, the gray leathery skin, the complete lack of a nose and ears, those highly distinct spikes down the back. It wasn't just similar, it was an exact, unbelievable one-to-one match. Even Tolentino herself later admitted that the creature she swore she saw outside her window looked impressively identical to the monster featured in that blockbuster movie.
So, the huge takeaway here is that the foundational text of the Chupacabra myth, the very first sighting that gave this thing its iconic alien look, was heavily influenced, if not entirely generated, by Hollywood special effects. On top of that, Radford's deep dive revealed that despite all those terrifying rumors, there was absolutely zero actual physical evidence of an alien creature. Nothing. And what about those animals that were supposedly drained completely of their blood? Well, the veterinarians who actually performed the necropsies confirmed they weren't bled dry at all. They were just victims of normal, mundane predators, like wild dogs. The whole drain delusion happened because the blood naturally settled, pooled, and coagulated internally after death. It's just a totally normal process of biological decay. It's a perfect example of how sheer panic can just completely override basic logic. The original alien Chupacabra was entirely a phantom.
Let's pivot a bit and look at Section 3, the biological reality.
Okay, so if the bipedal Puerto Rican alien was just a myth, how do we explain the very real, very physical bodies of monsters that soon started turning up in the US? By the early 2000s, the Chupacabra had migrated to places like Texas and New Mexico, but witnesses there weren't describing a two-legged alien with spikes. No, they were dragging in the actual physical corpses of four-legged, completely hairless, horrific-looking creatures. The myth had fundamentally mutated into something totally visceral and disgusting. People were holding the bodies of what they firmly believed were chupacabras, but they looked absolutely nothing like Tolentino's monster. These things were leathery, gaunt, and emitted an incredibly pungent, foul odor that practically stung your eyes. So what exactly were these folks finding rotting in the hot Texan desert?
Well, science gives us a very clear, highly clinical, and honestly pretty sad answer. If we put on our veterinary pathologist hats for a second, we can confidently point the finger at Sarcoptes scabiei. That's the microscopic mite responsible for a severe, debilitating skin disease called sarcoptic mange. When a wild canine, like a coyote or a stray dog, gets a really bad case of mange, these microscopic mites burrow deep under their skin to lay eggs. This triggers a massive inflammatory response, causing complete total hair loss. And without that protective fur, their exposed skin becomes incredibly thickened, heavily wrinkled, and takes on this dark, grayish, leathery, almost reptilian look. Then, secondary bacterial skin infections take hold, which produces that remarkably foul, rotting odor everyone kept mentioning. To anyone who isn't professionally trained in veterinary pathology, a severely infected coyote simply doesn't look like a coyote anymore. Stripped of its fur and ravaged by disease, it looks exactly like a demon from hell.
And this brilliantly connects a massive piece of the puzzle. Why were these supposedly elusive, wild monsters suddenly breaking into chicken coops and goat pens, exposing themselves to humans? Biologist Barry Akinar hits the nail on the head. These animals are utterly ravaged by disease. They're exhausted, fatigued, running severe fevers. A coyote in this horrific state is way too weak to ever run down a fast rabbit or a deer in the wild. But a penned goat or a caged chicken, that is an incredibly easy, desperate meal for a starving, deeply sick animal. So the underlying biology perfectly explains the supposedly monstrous behavior.
Now let's explore Section 4, Metaphor for Economic Crisis.
All right, so we have Hollywood movies inspiring alien sightings, and we have microscopic mites creating hideous, diseased canines. But why did society immediately jump to the conclusion of a vampire monster? To understand that, we actually have to look beyond biology and into the fascinating realm of sociology. If you closely track the spread of the Chupacabra hysteria, it behaves exactly like a highly contagious virus. But it didn't just spread geographically, it spread along very specific lines of severe societal stress. Let this sink in for a second. It started in Puerto Rico in 1995. Then in 1996, the massive panic violently jumped to Mexico, striking right in the dead center of a historic, devastating economic crash. Then, in 2002, waves of sightings abruptly erupted in Argentina, precisely coinciding with the catastrophic Corralito banking collapse that literally froze the entire country. The sudden appearance of this monster was incredibly predictable. It showed up exactly when and where everyday people were experiencing massive, overwhelming turmoil in their daily lives.
This is where our explainer gets truly fascinating. Academics, sociologists, historians, they've analyzed this strange correlation extensively. When they look at the timeline of the Chupacabra, they don't see a biological organism. They see an academic goldmine. Their research impartially points out that the monster wasn't a physical reality at all. Instead, it served as a powerful, collective reflection of a population's deepest, darkest societal fears. It became an instantly recognizable icon that perfectly, almost beautifully, encapsulated the profound anxieties of an incredibly turbulent era.
Let's slowly break down exactly how this powerful metaphor operated across these completely different regions. In Puerto Rico, underlying cultural anxieties about U.S. control manifested in widespread rumors that the chupacabra was actually a secret escaped NASA genetic experiment. Over in Mexico in 1996, the country was reeling from the North American Free Trade Agreement, a sudden peso devaluation, and intense political upheaval. Sociological analyses suggest that chupacabras simply became a stark, literal symbol of a system that was blood-sucking the rural poor. In fact, critics at the time impartially pointed out that the non-stop media focus on the monster was a highly convenient political smokescreen to distract citizens from a crumbling economy. Similarly, in Argentina during the sheer panic of the Corralito crisis, where everyday citizens suddenly found they couldn't even access their own life savings, the monster perfectly mirrored that terrible feeling. It represented the terror of having your wealth, security, and livelihood inexplicably drained away in the dark of night by unseen, untouchable financial institutions.
Bringing it all together in Section 5, Anatomy of a Myth.
So, what do you get when you cross a sci-fi movie, a sick coyote, and profound economic anxiety? You get the anatomy of a perfect modern myth. The single most fascinating takeaway from our autopsy of the chupacabra is this: belief entirely preceded the evidence. The media and public anxiety actively created the idea of the monster first. Then, when a farmer happened to see a coyote ravaged by mange that they couldn't identify, they didn't see a sick dog. Their highly primed brain immediately saw the terrifying chupacabra they'd been hearing about on the evening news. Psychologically, it makes perfect, undeniable sense. We instinctively invent physical monsters to cope with invisible, abstract threats. Let's be honest, it is immensely easier and psychologically way more comforting to organize a neighborhood patrol with shotguns to hunt a physical, bleeding vampire in the dark woods than it is to try and fight a skyrocketing inflation rate, a currency devaluation, or the overwhelming complexities of global trade agreements.
The chupacabra was never a true creature of flesh and bone. It was a creature of our own making, born from the flickering lights of Hollywood, shaped by a microscopic disease, and entirely fueled by our collective, deep-seated anxieties. It really holds a dark mirror up to what we fear most when we feel utterly powerless, which leaves us with a rather unsettling thought to end this explainer on. If moments of intense economic and social crises are the fertile breeding grounds for these modern monsters, as we look at the rising anxieties and uncertainties of our own world today, what monster are we getting ready to invent next? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep your eyes open and always keep questioning what you think you see in the shadows.